Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and for the first time in a long while, I finally have another class guide in the Lord of the Rings Online, and today we are returning to the Hunter. This is a class that I have already covered each trait tree in depth in separate videos, so in this video I will be trying something new, focusing more on a few different leveling builds and options you have, and just like in general with Hunter leveling, general solo questing, landscaping, and even group content, we will be doing some leveling builds for those. So the video will be sectioned off per build, and instead of going like as in-depth on each trait tree, I plan to briefly describe my class trait path in the context of leveling on a hunter so we can quickly go through each build and see how they work. I will also be mixing in little bits and pieces of gameplay on my high level hunter to just like visually demonstrate how some of these traits work and how they are effective or not. So at the end of this, I will also be covering a leveling virtue section, which I hope is helpful since that is often the number one question I actually get in all my class guides is the virtue, so I am including that. But quickly, before we actually get into the first build, I do want to point out that the Hunter is a very good option for leveling. They offer quick kill speeds, a solid survival kit, high burst damage, optionally very good mobility if you go in the blue line, and they even have some decent self-healing and survivability, which may be surprising. So it really is a great class for general leveling, and with this guide on the builds, I hope to help you all learn more about all the options you can choose from to help you in leveling your Hunter. Alright, so moving in game here, I first want to actually give an overview of what each trait tree offers in terms of leveling. So first of all, the blue line, that is going to be the mobile one. You can use that and shoot on the move is the big thing with that, so you can keep on running in your gameplay. You can get a lot of things that boost your speed in general. And then the red line is more about dealing maximum damage. You have to stand still, but you can do really strong burst damage as you are leveling with that, so it can be a good option for that. And finally, the yellow line offers a lot of area of effect damage and crowd control, so it can be very good. It boosts a lot of the survival kit options that the hunters have, and if you're running through difficult content, that could be a good option. But even the other trait trees, the red line and the blue line, they do offer some general survivability tools that can make them good for soloing tougher content as well. But the very first build I want to actually share is what I will call my general recommended hunter leveling build. It's like the one I recommend the most. Okay, so let's go ahead and spec into the blue line here, and I do want to point out we actually get a couple skills, but again, that is not the focus of this video. What is the focus is going through the actual build that I will be recommending for leveling again. And the first thing I would recommend for the hunter just range damage or the damage for bow skills that consume focus, I would recommend going at getting 5 points in strong draw, because you will be using your focus consumers. You really want to start combat with your focus consumers at maximum focus and using those. So that is going to be something that is good to start. And then one of the big things in the second row is getting split shot. That will help with any AoE situations. It's also a very strong skill, so it's something that will help you a lot and do a lot of damage. Just to point out, we actually would have to apply this and we can get split shot just to see how much damage it does, and right now I'll hit 4 targets and has a short induction. It does cost 2 focus, but it's something that is very good if you do happen to have multiple mobs on you. It can sometimes, depending on your gear and like how new your bow is, it can be something that can even one-shot multiple mobs at once, or in combination. One thing you can do, I did mention that I would be showing some gameplay, so we'll go ahead and do that right here. I have a split shot right up here. I do have the trait for that, and it's applied. So let's go ahead and get 2 enemies on us. And it might be a little bit odd on this hunter, but if I use split shot and then low cut, both of these attacks at once, sometimes that combination can defeat enemies. But right now, that did not work for this hunter, but at low levels, it's something you could definitely notice. And as we mentioned, one of the benefits of the blue line is being able to cast while on the move, and then just using your focus consumer is going a little bit bad about the gameplay here at the start, unfortunately, but at the start there, I should have focused on barrage and penetrating shot, but setting that aside, that is one of the benefits of blue line. And let's go ahead and move on with the traits a little bit more. So increasing the targets of that, probably not the most helpful. Then we could get a little bit extra focus from quick shot, but that's something that's not going to be too impactful. I found getting press onward can actually be very nice if you need the heal or power, and it's only 1 trait point, so I'd go ahead and get that. And for my hunter, I got the rest and just plain old range damage. Now from here, this is an interesting choice that I did not consider too much in my in-depth blue line build, because I was focusing on basically damage and your output as a hunter. But I actually recommend Pathfinder, which does not, it's currently bugged and does not say what it does. So we'll do an experiment and see how that works. You can press the H key to anchor skills like that. And then if we get the trait, we can go ahead and see how much it actually affects, and it should be 3%. So that can get you all the way up to 30% movement speed. With all 5 of these points, it'll give plus 15% at the end. Again, it does not show that it is bugged right now just with the display, but it still actually works. But I have found on the Blue Line Hunter while leveling, getting something like this to boost your movement speed is actually very impactful, because a lot of times you'll be just running, and even though Find the Path only works out of combat, it's still something you're out of combat a lot and running between mobs or something. I found it surprisingly impactful, and compared to boosting my damage by like 1%, for 1 trait point, I didn't really find that actually to be worth it. So on my Hunter, I really recommend going ahead and getting all 5 points of that actually. I will point out, if you really like using intent concentration and getting that focus from that, that is something you could go ahead and put a point in. But we'll go ahead and get Pathfinder, and I find that very effective, and that's why I spend so long talking about it. Now for the next 5 points, they're going to be a little bit rough. This will help you with a little bit of survivability getting Blood Arrow, but getting Exsanguinate in the 3rd trait on that will be very helpful, because now whenever you use Blood Arrow, you'll have a guaranteed bleed. So the way that actually works out in gameplay, in combat, is you can use Blood Arrow and then just use Exsanguinate. I would actually recommend using Exsanguinate if you can line it up, depending on the situation with your character, using Exsanguinate on a fresh enemy, because the light damage over time will be very effective in killing enemies. And you might only need to use that one skill and can keep on being like on the move and mobile while you are doing that. But anyway, we can go ahead and get back to the traits and where to go in the build from here. And there is actually Shot Through the Heart is something I would not quite recommend yet, because Merciful Shot is something you probably won't get to use too much. And I know it's something that's appealing, it may look appealing later, especially if we got Heartseeker. But we'll go ahead and skip that for now. I think getting Volley will be the best use of your points. One thing that is very effective also is the Hunter damage over time, but when you are in the Blue Line, and especially leveling, you don't really get to see the benefit of the damage over time, where boosting that by 20% would be as effective as a trait like Volley that can make some inductions instant. And then from there, one of the biggest traits you can get is Precision. That will allow you and focus the Precision stance to generate a lot more focus just passively over time, so that's very helpful. I also have run into a little bit of power issues on my leveling Hunter, where getting Bow of the Righteous is pretty good at this point. And if you really run into power issues, you can get Strength of the Earth as well. But Bow of the Righteous would be a little bit of help. And here is where we have to actually go back and fill in some traits. And this is a point from my experience on my Hunters and leveling them again. Going ahead and getting maybe improved intent concentration could be helpful at this point. It's something that's not quite as useful at high levels, but while leveling, and at that point it is something I would recommend. Also getting the last point in Strong Draw will be good, and that will actually unlock the last row. And we keep getting set bonuses, but again, I actually have to remind myself that I'm not going in depth on all that. And as far as this, we can go ahead and get Rapid Fire. That's a very strong trait. So this once again is going to be our baseline Blue Line build as far as getting to the last trait, and we spent 31 trait points, and this is the general recommended Blue Line build that I have. Again, as you get higher levels, especially like this character at level 120, I obviously have a lot more trait points, but at this point you have a lot of flexibility in how you actually want to build your character. And it really depends on what your character needs. You can actually build your character depending on your strength and all that sort of stuff. So for example, something like the Hunter damage over time right here. If your fights are lasting long and you actually use skills like Barbed Arrow, Exsanguinate, even Heartseeker if you got that trait in the red line, all that stuff does damage over time. And if you notice mobs are lasting long, they aren't really taking all that much damage, and your damage over time effects rather are actually ticking a lot, this is something that would be very beneficial to you. Just for example, there are a lot of things like that that you need to think about with your character. Now, two traits that I could recommend for an AoE build for the Blue Line is actually getting Rain of Arrows and Explosive Shot here. Unfortunately, it does not actually show those, but the damage for Rain of Arrows and Explosive Arrow are actually fairly similar, and they are both very good for AoE damage that you can actually do on the go as a Blue Line Hunter. So that's actually something I am going to go ahead and pick up, because from my Hunter experience, increasing single target damage or even Hunter damage over time is not always the best, because things die so fast, individual targets die so fast, that boosting AoE for when I need it has in my experience, been the most impactful and helpful, and that's why I'm recommending this as an option at least. So getting Heartseeker, of course, would be good. We want to get True Shot, go ahead and rank that up, get 1 point in Low Cut for this, and 1 point in Fast Draw. Again, if you are wondering about these choices, I really hate breezing through it like this in a way, but if you are really curious about those choices, I have the more in-depth builds that I can actually link below if I remember, but there's Explosive Arrow, go ahead and get that, and we'll just do 79 trait points for this for an AoE focus blue line build. And let me go ahead and actually put these traits somewhere more reasonable on my skill bar. And I planned this episode to be right around an orc camp, which somebody is running away from, but we can use some of the new AoE skills. They all cost focus, so I do have to keep that in mind, but let's go ahead and pull a few enemies and just see how this goes. I'll even use that one cooldown we got so we can use our focus consumers a little bit better. So there's Explosive Arrow, that did a decent amount of damage. Split Shot, I already went through Low Cut a little bit, how you can use that. We'll use Blood Arrow and then exsanguinate one of these enemies, except I exsanguinated one that was almost dead. We did get Heartseeker, so go ahead and use that. We actually got the instant induction on that, and we have some AoEs off cooldown, but there is only one enemy left, and he just got totally one-shot by Barrage there, which is one of the nice things about Barrage. When you build that up to tier 3, it is very hard to not one-shot things sometimes. But that is the Blue Line Hunter, a little bit of the gameplay going into the AoE build. And at this point, I want to remind you all, if you have any feedback on this, especially the gameplay and the flow of that, me showing the traits, how quickly I'm going through it, how non-in-depth or how in-depth I'm going on the individual traits, any sort of feedback on that is appreciated, because this is very odd to me and new to me. But I think we can go ahead and move on to the next build that I want to present here. So the next build will be in the red line, and its focus is on burst damage and killing things very quickly. You will not be as mobile, you will have less defensive tools than the other specs, but you can kill things very quickly compared to the other trait trees with this build. You do get one little benefit with Pinning Shot in that you can use that on enemy and root them, and that's a little bit of a help, but you can also attack things from farther away, so a little bit of a sniper-like build in a way as well. Okay, speccing into the red line, we want to go ahead and get range critical chance. That's going to be the best trait in the first row, and I will recommend getting Heartseeker. That's something you're going to want to open with as often as possible, because not only does it do a ton of damage up front, we can actually go ahead and apply this and look at it in the gameplay, but Heartseeker does a ton of damage up front if I just hit an enemy there with it, but it does a ton of damage over time as well, so it's something that is on cooldown. You want to use it as frequently as possible. And also, one thing I just did, you might have noticed, is used Swift Bow, then immediately followed it up with Blindside. One of the benefits of Blindside is it is an immediate skill, meaning that it could animation cancel. It's something you can use whenever and it'll immediately go off no matter what you are in the middle of. So a skill like Swift Bow, following that up with Blindside, is also very strong burst damage. We can do that once again, actually opening it up on an enemy, and that is what it is. I will say at low levels, that's actually something you might notice frequently one-shots enemies. It's more like a two-shot actually, because you're using two skills, but Swift Bow followed up by Blindside is very strong opener as well for when Heartseeker is on cooldown. But moving on, we can get Swift Bow damage, but in general I would recommend for the downtimes to go ahead and get the induction bow damage, and that will be pretty good. It's actually, if you use Swift Bow and don't really find yourself using Quick Shot or Barbed Arrow, never actually needing those in your red line, you could get Swift and True and get the increased Swift Bow damage. That's definitely not a bad thing, but in my hunter's experience, I found that I was using Quick Shot and even Barbed Arrow enough for it to be worth getting the overall induction bow damage. Now, another thing notable at low levels is Strength Stance is actually worth it, because that is better than Precision Stance. At low levels, where getting the flat baseline damage is very good, even though I know at high levels most hunters will run in Precision Stance even in the red line. But I'll go ahead and get that and then cap out the draw weight there, and then for the rest of the traits until we get into the next row, go ahead and get Swift and True and get that Swift Bow damage. Actually, I'm just kidding. I totally skipped over Quick Escape on accident. That's actually something, I totally messed this up, but getting Quick Escape is actually the first thing you want to get in the third row. I totally skipped over that. And Quick Escape is very helpful because whenever you do run into dangerous situations, getting the root from low cut and being able to move without focus loss is of course good. So this would be the actual path I would recommend for the red line totally. mix that up again. But next you have some options. I would say if you ever run into AoE situations, just having Rain of Arrows, it's 1 trait point to get that, it would be worth it. I would only recommend getting the first rank in that. There's not much point in you getting the second rank this early. Also, something thinking about like Merciful Shot critical multiplier, not all that helpful. So at this point, I would actually go ahead and get the Swift and True. Now this is where you're really up for consideration depending what you're using a red line for. Maybe you have, since you have 2 trait configurations you could use, for example, maybe you're using the blue line for general leveling, and then you switch to the red line if you really need the burst damage. That is when getting the trait specifically Burn Hot is very useful. And I've actually found on my Hunter that getting both points in that is worth it before getting the induction reduction. But getting the induction reduction, or the decreased induction would maybe be a better way to describe that. Getting that next will definitely be a good thing, but again, it depends if you're using the burst damage and actually utilizing the cooldown of Burn Hot if you want both points in that. But putting, first of all, 3 points in that unlocks the next thing, and I would actually recommend to go ahead and get the last point in that, because these are traits that are more over time based, and you should be killing things, regular mobs especially, you should be killing fast. Even elites you should be killing fast enough. You might not realize the full benefit of these traits in like over time combat. Now, critical hits generating 1 focus is very helpful, and that will help you even with bursts, especially as you get to upshot in the last row here. But one thing I will point out is if you use quick shot a lot, actually getting the chance to reduce the induction of swift bow by 100% could be very helpful, also increases swift bow damage. But in my experience, I would go ahead and actually get deadly precision. And there's also one thing we left off, is maybe at this point, if you're using Heartseeker and the enemy is still up even after all the bleed pulses, that is something to keep in mind to go ahead and get that second point there if you want that. And if you want an even stronger bleed after that, get in for the kill as options. But I would, on my Hunter's experiences again, the faster burst damage and not really focusing on the damage over time because you kill things so fast is what is more worth it. And now you really do have that consideration. Maybe you want to improve your AoE damage slightly. You could even get the Hail of Arrows if you're using Rain of Arrows a lot, and really do want the AoE focus. And for the rest of the points, what I would generally recommend is actually just filling out some broadly useful things. So if you are maybe doing instances, that is one thing I have not quite covered. Getting the Heartseeker would definitely be helpful. This is good for an instance group content build while leveling as well. And then getting Upshot for the last point in that. And this is the baseline redline build for general burst damage and group content that I would recommend to start off with. Some other traits to look out for is Penetrating Shot critical vulnerability debuff. That is something to look out for as an option. The next thing I would actually recommend, I should have pointed this one out first, is Bodkin Arrows. That is a generally good trait to have. Even Merciful Shot critical multiplier if you are doing a lot of group content. This one probably wouldn't be that great for solo, but it is something that it can be if you're killing things a little bit slowly, and actually utilizing Merciful Shot is something that can help, of course. And then for a final one, maybe Fast Draw to generally improve Quick Shot and get faster inductions all around. Now from here, unlike the blue line, I feel like the path forward from here is much less straightforward than the blue line. I would actually fill out the traits in the red line, get Mitigation Bypass, I would even get the Penetrating Shot vulnerability debuff, even get the bow inductions with Quick Shot, and maybe even the Merciful critical multiplier. That's actually something I would do on my Hunter. Again, if I'm doing a ton of AoEs, I could go all the way down to Hail of Arrows, but that is something I generally do not do on the red line as a burst damage spec. But from here, it's really wide open what you want to do. Maybe you want to get Rain of Thorns if you really want some AoE and crowd control. That is an option. And also options are just things in the blue line. There's a lot of generally useful things in the blue line, and that is going to be one place I will go ahead and just show a little bit of a blue line build after finishing out the red line. And first we want just flat range damage. Getting Press Onward is actually very helpful. Even Split Shot, just as it was with the blue line build, is helpful. We'll go ahead and put 3 points for, 3 points for stuff that the things that consume focus. That's very helpful for Upshot as a particular skill. You could reduce the cooldown of Intent Concentration, but I actually would not recommend that. Also, find the path movement speed. I find that to be most effective if you're just playing with a regular old blue line build as we covered earlier, we'll go ahead and get quick shot focus and then exsanguinate. That is the big thing. Getting exsanguinate and even in for the kill, or not in for the kill, rather, shot through the heart. Getting that, this is really going to be, it requires a lot of trait points to get down that way, but that's where you can get some really good stuff in the blue line for the red line hunter. And let's go ahead and kill a few things. It will probably be fairly quick that I kill things. I will stay in the strength stance just because I showed that trait's effectiveness for low levels at least. I will go ahead and stay in that for this character. And the first thing we want to do is build focus. And I should probably pull up an elite, fight with like an elite or elite master, but let's go ahead and show this. We'll even have an orc attack us kind of unplanningly. And here I actually pulled a few mobs, a few more than I would have wanted. We can use split shot and rain of arrows to help deal with them though. Blood arrow on this guy and blindside to try to kill him as quickly, and we'll go back to the swift bow. Not really utilizing that one too much. So I did have exsanguinate, but no longer have that. Alright, so let's go ahead and go in camouflage, and let's pull this signature. I will go ahead and do that swift bow upshot opener that is so strong, and that just killed the signature outright, and now I do have to deal with a couple of these archers, but that is okay because I feel like I'm the superior archer here. And this is what the red line plays like, one-shotting things, and that is a big feature of it and one of the big benefits. The high burst damage if you really need to kill something quickly, and that is the actual gameplay section for that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next builds that I would have. Alright, the final build I have is, you probably guessed it, it's going to be the yellow line, and this is what I call the champion strategy of the hunter. You're going to be in melee range a lot, and you're going to be AoEing things down just like a yellow line champion. Now, you do have a lot of survivability tools, crowd control, that type of stuff, and I think I just pulled an enemy, but it's a little swarm thing here. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the yellow line build, and again, we're focused on AoE and general survival, and this is something that is a little bit odd, but on my hunter, this build that I'm recommending with the AoE and general survival is I would actually not recommend getting something that boosts your damage, because I switched to this spec. It's something I would like to potentially have in my back pocket as something to survive. So getting physical mitigation, you can solo some group content, and getting something to boost your defenses can be more effective than damage over time, even with the yellow line. So that's actually something I would recommend, and it's very hard for me to recommend that because usually I am all for boosting my damage, but if I am switching to the yellow line, it's usually because I want defenses or AoE damage, which wouldn't be much damage over time. So those two in combination means I actually want to get the mitigation, and that's super weird. But let's go ahead and get explosive arrow. That's something good to start. You can get the boost your traps. That's actually something I would go ahead and get there, because traps, especially at the low levels, we'll even go ahead and apply this. It's unfortunately not as strong at the high levels here, but something like triple trap is very strong, and if I can get an orc just to show that, we can go ahead and pull this orc here, and I will build focus with intent concentration, and we will use triple trap, and that orc got into two of those traps and it just killed it. Also, explosive decoy, this is something we might not be able to see all the way of. We can look at it in the background maybe. Use lingering wound on the enemy, but deadly decoy rather. I always want to call it explosive decoy. If you do hear me say explosive decoy, I mean deadly decoy. That is something that does a ton of damage at low levels, but that is, you probably saw it did hardly any damage at this level. So that's something that can one-shot enemies at low level. Low level meaning like 20 to 30, maybe even up to 40. It can just about one-shot enemies, but at high levels, that scales really poorly. So that is one thing about this yellow line build, is it is insanely strong at low levels, but low levels again 20 to maybe 40, and then after that it really drops off. But then at higher levels it becomes relatively decent. It's just the things that are strong at low levels no longer are as strong at high levels. So that is something to keep in mind. This will become less and less effective as you level up. But going on with the build, we can go ahead and get Rain of Thorns. That will be a big help in survivability and getting 1 point in that at least. You can do some AoE area of effect damage, which is a little bit redundant with that. But moving on, again, we want survivability. I don't know that getting the physical mitigation, I'd actually, especially at low levels, get explosive arrow and deadly decoy damage, just boost that up even more. Get piercing trap, makes our traps range. That is one of the big benefits. I'll go ahead and show that actually with the gameplay is get my focus up, and we can use triple trap here. And you can use that at range, and all that burst damage, it's even high at this level. It's very high at low levels, I know. Go ahead and use those, use Lingering Wound, use some of my skills, and that guy should just be dying from all those effects, and he was. But yeah, using those traps at range is very beneficial. That's a big trait when you actually get that. But from here, we're going to go back and get the damage, the AoE damage with Deadly Decoy and Explosive Arrow, and I need to move my trait tree back where it was because it's going to drive me crazy. There we go. I think it's back into position with where it needs to be. And then actually increase the mitigation. And one thing we can get is general evade chance, but if you are looking for survivability actually in the yellow line, one thing I will recommend is actually endurance stance. And there are a few reasons I would recommend endurance stance, but if we're in endurance stance, we might as well get the endurance traits, and I still almost hate recommending that because it's something that's very defensive, but it is something that will help you if you're doing tougher content and allow you to survive a little bit better. Wounded Prey in general is something I will not be going for. Even this stuff, the Grace Period and Distracting Shot cooldown, those aren't the most effective, so we're just going to boost our defenses even more. Again, this is very survivability focused build. Go ahead and get these last two traits here, and this is the survivability / AoE focused yellow line build. Now from here you have a lot of options, but the options I would recommend building towards are basically more AoE and more survivability. If there is any of that, there actually is some of that in the blue line mainly. So we will go ahead and look at potential further builds, but I feel like with the gameplay we have showed that a lot. The yellow line gameplay, it's very busy, there's a lot going on. So that would basically take me forever to actually show all of it, but I can show a little bit just using all these traps, and the traps just killed that orc, and that is one of the strategies, just use traps and they kill things. At least triple trap, that trap at least is our strongest one. All the other ones, as far as their damage, you might be able to tell don't scale all that well. The one trap is pretty decent, but yeah, the other ones, if I remember correctly, like this one, Piercing Trap, isn't the most effective, but it's relatively effective. One of the big benefits of Triple Trap is there are 3 traps, so you get that effect 3 times, and it's pretty significant damage after that. But anyway, moving on from that, we can go back to the building options, and I do have 60 points available. Again, this is something that it depends on your character's level exactly how you want to build from here. So for example, you could go for Rain of Arrows and actually Heartseeker. Those would both really boost your damage and even AoE damage with Rain of Arrows. Single target damage significantly with Heartseeker. That could be a very big trait for you. But if you really want survivability as the biggest thing, you can get Press Onward in the blue line and Split Shot at the same time, and it does not require as many trait points investments. So go ahead and get that 1 point in Split Shot, and maybe at that point is when you could switch to the red line, get the good old critical chance, and maybe at this point it's really, I'm going to be honest that all of these traits are not the most appealing for the yellow line hunter, but maybe go ahead and get plain old induction, bow damage, and critical multiplier, because you'll be using quick shot, for example, a lot, and even barbed arrow a lot just to actually build focus. You could even get fast draw just to get faster inductions. That is a possibility, and actually it'd probably be after 1 point in low cut. Go ahead and get that, and then you can get Rain of Arrows and you have even more AoE. So this is the very AoE centric yellow line build, and I do want to show, we'll go ahead and show the champion strategy. Let me just organize my skills a little bit here. And this is something that is true with the yellow line hunter. There are so many skills you have to actually manage. Okay, let's go ahead and place some traps. Explosive Decoy, even though it doesn't do too much damage, is something that's very useful to build even at this level. Go ahead and use Intent Concentration to build up all of my focus, and then Rain of Thorns, and we'll run away from those enemies because they're all rooted by Rain of Thorns, or at least ideally they all are. Explosive Shot, and then Triple Trap again. We'll use Explosive Decoy just to grab aggro from the enemies. We'll use Press Onward or Survivability or Heal. And there might be too many orcs right here, unfortunately. Very bad showcase, and I am mispressing my buttons, which is also not a good thing. Use Triple Trap again. That is one of our strong skills. This is actually something I can spam Quick Shot here as much as I can, at least. And unfortunately, I ultimately died with trying to get the quick gameplay there, just running into the camp. I normally wouldn't run into the camp quite like that on my hunter. Probably would have a little bit better strategy, which I honestly should be showing if I'm making a guide on this. But now that we are a little bit calmer with the amount of enemies that are here, one thing I want to show, and this is actually true for all of the builds for survivability in general on the Hunter, if you go into Endurance Stance, Quick Shot heals, and as quick as you cast Quick Shot, especially in the blue or red line, that is very significant actually. Even though it seems like the heal might be small numbers there, that is very significant and will heal you for quite a bit over time. It's something that really surprised me when I actually found out that that worked and was as strong as it was on my leveling hunters. But this is the benefit. If this was a really tough mob, if it was like an elite master, even nemesis, you could just keep on rooting them, keep on using your traps, and that is why I'm going about the gameplay a little bit extra long here, even if I don't necessarily need to wait that long to kill him. And that actually brings me to the end. That is all 3 builds that I want to highlight on this hunter. We had the general leveling one with the blue line, and then we had the red line, the burst damage one with the red line, and then the yellow line was more of the AoE / survivability in the champion strategy build. It's a lot more effective at low levels, unfortunately. There's still the crowd control in that aspect of it at high levels here, but it really is something that is a lot stronger at low levels and will help you with difficult content, things like the group content in Angmar, for example, or if you're trying to solo instances, 3-man instances especially, and any general landscape group content. Again, Angmar being a big point for that, at least at low levels. All that stuff is going to be beneficial in the yellow line build. And that is not to say that the blue line build is not good for solo survivability, because you can, once again, let's actually shift back to the live gameplay. Alright, back to the live gameplay on the blue line hunter here. I do want to actually highlight the survivability with the endurance stance and quick shot. So quick shot still heals quite a bit in the blue line, but it's something you can actually kite enemies. You could even go in strength stance and kite the enemy. You'll slow them with quick shot if you use that in the strength stance. By the way, it's like minus 40% run speed, and then go back to precision, and then they will be slowed down, and you can just use quick shot to heal up. And a better way to actually show this is maybe equip a really weak bow here so we can actually see how that works. And if I use quick shot here, that will slow both of these hearts actually. We can do a little bit of AoE. Then I switch to endurance stance, and as I'm kiting them, you can see the healing values and how quickly quick shot is actually going off. If I were taking enough damage, you would actually see my character healing up. So that's something that is very strong, and maybe in the background gameplay you've seen me doing that I have had an Agroth and Arrowdale from my blue line hunter actually at the lower levels. It's a very strong strategy. And if you don't want to run the yellow line or have that spec built up, it is a strong option actually. Let's go and equip a good bow again. It is a strong option for survivability there. And alright, that is all I have after this very long video. Actually, we still have the virtue traits. I totally forgot about that. So the virtue traits are actually fairly simple overall. So loyalty is a very good baseline trait that I recommend. It's something that's actually not super strong at low levels, but is very good for the long-term benefit of your character. Compared to stuff like honor and fortitude, it actually offers more morale. Even though it's vitality, it offers more morale and just more defensive boost overall than honor and fortitude. So it is something that might not seem good at low levels, because honor and fortitude do at low levels offer more morale than loyalty, but it's something that is good and something I would recommend. And you can actually see the virtues I'm using on my hunter here, but we'll go ahead and put loyalty up there. Now the next 4 virtues that you could get are offensive ones. You could focus on defensive ones, but I think benefiting your hunter most would be offensive ones, just so you can kill things faster. You can use your other survivability and that type of stuff. Use your toolkit there if you really do need to survive things. But I will point out, with all that, you could get some virtues. Some potential ones to look out for are actually tolerance and fidelity. These two for the tactical mitigation mainly. If whatever content you're doing, you really need tactical mitigation, and you do have those virtues leveled up, they could be good options to slot in. So I did want to point that out, to be fair. But as far as the DPS virtues go, after getting loyalty at least, at low levels, wit is very valuable. It depends at high levels if you need finesse, if you actually want to equip that, and you can work that out with essences, that system at high level, to balance your stats. So that is actually what, even though for this hunter it's lower level than the others, that's actually the second one that I would recommend. So if we do kind of a ranking here, loyalty is usually the first one I go on my characters, and is the first one I was doing on my hunter to get some baseline survivability. Very helpful there. If you don't want the survivability or morale boost from loyalty at all, the first one you could actually do is wit and focus on the offensive ones first. But after that, Valor would be the next one I recommend, and I recommend that over Determination. Determination might seem good because it has agility, but that is a very inefficient way to actually get physical mastery. You only get 3 physical mastery per agility, so it's relatively inefficient with that. And actually, for the last one, it's up between Confidence and Determination. What really determines which one of these you want is if you really need critical rating for your stat, or if you need just raw physical mastery. You get more physical mastery, get more straight damage from Determination, and then you would get the critical or finesse if you need that. But in general, as far as stat weights go, if you are not near any stat caps, in general, this is the priority I would recommend. Loyalty, then Wit, then Valor, then Determination, and finally Confidence as the last one. And that's not to say Confidence isn't all that great, but the stats it offers and the numbers it offers, I would recommend the other ones as a higher priority. So that is it for the virtues. I think those will be generally helpful while leveling, just boost your damage, and even at high levels you do have essences which could have flexibility if you need the defensive stats that other virtues might offer that you aren't actually getting from these virtues. So these are all good to start with, I think. And now we are actually for real done with this video. To me, this seems like it has been a very long video, and I am not really sure. This is a big test, so I really want your all's feedback on if this was actually helpful, on the pacing of it, the format of it, all that sort of stuff. So the goal of this was actually to be a short video to go on the leveling builds and just show you all the different options, but unfortunately that just takes time, it seems like. So feedback on that, and I will try to improve in future episodes as we get to different classes. I also hope with the Hunter specifically, because it's a very popular class for leveling, that this does help anybody that actually is leveling on their Hunter, and a lot of the random tips I gave with the gameplay and actually showing that in an actual landscape area was a little bit helpful as well. Now with all that, and just in quick review, we did have the blue line build, which was used for general leveling, the red line build for high burst damage, and the yellow line build for general survivability and area of effect, and even champion strategy, which is most viable at low levels. And that is all I have for this video. Again, feedback if you have it, and I hope you learned something useful about the Hunter and leveling on your Hunter, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content. And thanks for watching, everyone.